speak a lot about mentors and sponsors being in the room and having a network that you can rely on. How important is it to have a mentor and a sponsor, and how important is it for women to have male sponsors in the room when decisions come for promotions or for high priority projects?
Well, there is a difference between a mentor and a sponsor. Anybody can be a mentor to you, and I find that people are very willing to mentor and to help if you ask for help. Sponsors are more difficult in that a sponsor is somebody who sits around the decision-making table and who's in a position to advocate for you. I did not realize until I was further along in my career and was sitting around that table how important it is that you have somebody that's willing to advocate for you. Because once you get to middle management, everybody's pretty competent. You wouldn't have gotten to that level if you weren't somebody who was good at execution. But to get to that next level, it's more about the relationships and who trusts you and who's willing to sit around that table and tell people about how great they think you will be in that next job. Your name doesn't even get on the list for those jobs if you don't have somebody who's willing to sponsor you. But you don't necessarily go up to somebody and ask them to be your sponsor. Sponsors typically find you and will support you because you're somebody who gets work done and who is, I tell people, be a star where you are. And so if you do good work, typically a sponsor will find you. I always tell people that that's why it's important to decide who your mentor is. Because a lot of times if you have a mentor who's somebody who's on a fast track, who's a great leader in your company, then maybe one of these days that person will be promoted and be sitting around that table and can advocate and speak to the fact that they've actually worked with you and seen that you do good quality work. So to some extent, I think it's important to be strategic about who your mentors are. And if somebody's a rising star in your company, to go and hang on to those coattails and say, I want to talk to you more about what it is that you do. People are pretty willing to help, but a lot of times I find women are reluctant to ask for that help. They're afraid to ask for it. And you just got to be willing to dare to put yourself out there and ask for that help.
And particularly for women or anyone who might be an introvert and finds that kind of stressful to be able to ask for a mentor, do you have any suggestions for them on ways to do that?
Yeah, one of the things I tell people is that most organizations have a review process where every 6 months you're meeting with your boss and you're getting feedback about things you've done well or things you can do better. And that's the time when you can also say, I would like to meet Joe, who works in another department. Could you call Joe and ask him if he would spend 15 minutes with me? And do an informational interview with that executive. Now what I tell people too is if you get that opportunity to do that 15 or 20 minute interview with that informational interview, make sure that's very productive. Make sure you're asking questions about what kinds of skills they're looking for people to come to work in their area, and try to build a relationship with that person. And then after you've met with them face to face, email them back and say, here's 3 pieces of advice I got from you. Here's what I did with them. Thank you. Let them know that their investment of that 15 or 20 minutes in you helped you be successful in your career, and they'll be more willing to meet with you on a pretty regular basis. So you don't have to call it mentoring and make somebody feel like they're locked into a mentoring relationship, but it can all start with that 15 to 20 minute informational interview, and then you just naturally following back up with that person. But it's up to the mentee to really drive that. There are a lot of formal mentoring processes inside companies, and I think it's great when they have those, but even in those situations, it's the mentee's responsibility to make sure that they're coming up with the agenda, coming up with the schedule, coordinating it with the assistant to this executive, because these people have a lot of irons in the fire and they have their own people reporting to them. So make sure that when they do spend time with you, they feel like it's time well spent. But you don't have to make that ask. That should be a perfectly logical thing for you to ask your boss to set up that informational interview.